It's Monday, October 3rd.
From inside the WTOP newsroom, this is the DMV Download, brought to you by the men and women of Steamfitters Local 602. Get an estimate and learn more at steamfitters-602.org.
Today, the most high-profile person to go on trial in connection with the insurrection on January 6th, Oathkeepers founder Stewart Rhodes, and 4 of his associates went before a judge and jury. The Department of Justice charged Rhodes and his deputies with seditious conspiracy, alleging he planned for weeks and acquired weapons to take control of the U.S. Capitol to prevent President Biden's confirmation. CBS News Congressional Correspondent Scott MacFarlane was in the room where it happened and brings us there.
They're just such profound allegations. If you take a step back to reflect upon them, they take your breath away. Alleging that this group tried to block the peaceful transfer of power in America.
And Megan is back in the DMV Download studios. Why was she gone for a few days last week? We'll tell you why.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Cloherty.
And I'm Luke Garrett. In one of the most highly anticipated trials in the wake of the January 6th insurrection, federal prosecutors began their opening statements, arguing that Stewart Rhodes, the leader of the Oathkeepers, and his associates planned a, quote, armed rebellion against the U.S. government. They said Rhodes' goal was to stop the peaceful transfer of presidential power.
CBS News Congressional Correspondent Scott MacFarlane has been covering the trials of every insurrectionist and continues to work on this one. He was in the D.C. District Courtroom this morning and joins us now. Scott, thank you for being here.
Of course.
So we can probably count the number of sedition conspiracy cases brought in front of a jury on 2 hands, maybe. It's a very rare charge. We heard opening statements today, and at the end of the Justice Department's Jeffrey Nestler's opening statement, he lays out his case against the Oathkeepers. You tweeted that opening statement was unlike any given before. Why did you say that?
Well, first of all, the seditious conspiracy charge is beyond rare. It's almost unheard of in American history. So a prosecutor explaining to a jury what that means is a rare moment. I'm not sure the jurors appreciate how rare this is, but it is rare. Well, also, this was a modern day attempt to overthrow the government, according to prosecutors. An armed group staging guns outside the city limits, allegations of possible boats to bring them into the city from Virginia, allegations that the group raised tens of thousands of dollars to equip this Insurrection Act force. Here's the thing. All of this is uncharted waters. That's both a burden and a responsibility for the prosecution, and they had to start making that case today.
Right. And Scott, you've been following a lot of these cases in the wake of January 6th. Did this one stand out, and why?
Uniquely. I'm glad you asked. The opening argument was a 90-minute, forceful, crisp laying out of facts by the prosecution. Department of Justice prosecutor Jeffrey Nestler, without notes, was just ratcheting his way through this series of allegations. And they're just such profound allegations. If you take a step back to reflect upon them, they take your breath away. Alleging that this group tried to block the peaceful transfer of power in America, that they knew they wanted to do this, that they were targeting in particular Speaker Pelosi, that they were targeting the Capitol for attack. That's a contrast even from other January 6 defendants who are accused of unlawfully picketing, parading, getting caught up with the crowd, entering and quickly exiting, having no damage, no efforts to assault, no plan ahead of time, and no leadership role. This is something quite different. This is a different stratosphere we've entered.
Scott, it took a little while to get us here, in part because the defense attorney for Mr. Rhodes, Philip Linder, has argued this isn't the right place to have this trial. Can you talk about some of those motions and what he was arguing for this to be dismissed?
First of all, they joined a growing list of January 6 defendants who have been trying to get their trials moved at Washington, D.C., arguing this is not the best venue for this trial because they've argued that the jury here can't be unbiased, that people who live in the District of Columbia are too viscerally connected to January 6th, live in close proximity to Capitol Hill, or are biased because of what the defense lawyers call inflammatory media coverage. The judges, one after another, have knocked out those requests and ordered the trials to remain in Washington, D.C., and said jury selection is enough to secure an unbiased jury. That's what happened here, but it happened here over and over and over again. This group kept asking to get their case moved, including at the 11th hour. Just didn't work. So the trial proceeds with a District of Columbia jury.
And that jury sat down, this morning. What did the prosecutors with the Defense Department really say to them? What were their key arguments in their opening statement?
That this was a plan that this was not an organic thing. They're arguing that a conspiracy involves multiple people playing multiple roles. But they also leaned into this argument, which I wasn't surprised by, but also wasn't expecting, that a conspiracy needn't write down and codify everybody's role and plot to be a conspiracy, that there can be some unspoken roles or things that aren't formally noted, but that people know they have to do anyhow. And I think that's likely forecasting some of the arguments they're going to make, that there was an understanding or an unwritten set of responsibilities for this group.
We spoke a little bit about this at the top, but this charge specifically is difficult to prove. Do you know why that is?
It's so rarely done. I mean, there aren't a lot of line prosecutors at the U.S. Justice Department with a deep portfolio of seditious conspiracy prosecutions. But I'll note the counter argument, which is a lot of these cases from January 6th are unprecedented for prosecutors. They haven't done something like this before.
Right.
And you both know the batting average right now for the Justice Department in front of a D.C. jury in January 6 cases, batting 1,000. They haven't had one acquittal on any one charge. So the success rate is high as they enter the highest level of trial.
And so moving now to Rhodes' defense attorney, Philip Linder, what arguments did he make to the D.C. jury?
Philip Linder, who is still Stewart Rhodes' defense lawyer, even though Stewart Rhodes tried to dismiss him at the last minute, was more forecasting an argument than making an argument. That we're going to show you that there are weaknesses in what the Justice Department will present. We're going to show you the other side of this story without really specifying what that other side is or what the other argument is. But he did indicate what the prosecutors indicate, that they're going to make some argument about the Insurrection Act, that they were preparing for the prospect of Donald Trump invoking the Insurrection Act, and that they were readying themselves, equipping themselves for that contingency. Therefore, the defense would argue, justifying what they did January 6th. The prosecutors know they're going there and have already tried to whittle that down. I also expect there to be some defense from these defense attorneys, based on their pretrial filings, that'll argue this group was here on a security mission to provide security for VIPs. The prosecutors also forecast that contingency by arguing in their opening arguments that this group was not licensed or paid or trained to provide security in the District of Columbia that day.
And just to take a pause here, can we talk a little bit about the Insurrection Act? I mean, what even is that?
So this is where I'd love to call up my wife, who's a history teacher, because she was schooling me on this ahead of trial. It really is an ancient, I think it's an 1807 law that empowers the president to federalize the Guard or send out the U.S. military when circumstances require it, for civil disorder, for rebellion. I mean, this is centuries old and obviously not something that's been actualized or mobilized in modern American history. But what the prosecutors are going to say is you can claim you were here on behalf of the Insurrection Act or preparing for the possibility of the Insurrection Act. Donald Trump didn't invoke it.
Right.
Which would therefore not excuse anything you allegedly did that day.
Scott, what do we know about Stewart Rhodes? I know he's the most high-profile person who's in this group on trial together, but what is his background?
Interesting you asked that, because the prosecutors gave more of a biography of Stewart Rhodes during opening arguments today than they did for the other four co-defendants, making clear that Stewart Rhodes is a leader, not only a man who wears the prosecutors say his trademark cowboy hat, and a man who wears an eye patch, but they say he's a Harvard law grad, a former congressional staffer, somebody who's well-versed in federal law and knew the circumstances quite well of January 6th, knew that it was a pivotal day, or at least believed it was a pivotal day. He came to January 6th with exceptional knowledge of the law, according to prosecutors. That seems to be some part of the trajectory of where their case is going. That Stewart Rhodes, they say, led the conspiracy, founded the Oathkeepers, and was driving some of this plan.
For some of us who might forget, between all these groups with January 6th, who are the Oathkeepers?
They're a far-right group, according to not only the Department of Justice, but those who closely monitor these types of organizations. They are, I think some would argue, paramilitary. So they have any number of military veterans, people with military skills among their members. They have deployed themselves to Ferguson during unrest there. They had any number of presences here in our community before January 6th, during the time between Election Day and January 6th when there were so many fraught moments here in the District of Columbia. This particular group is a snapshot of them. These are 5 of the accused Oath Keepers. There are many others, but these 5 are the first ones to go on trial as a chunk. There's one from Ohio. There's one from Florida. Stewart Rhodes is from Texas. And then there's Thomas Caldwell, who is from Berryville. He's from Clark County, Virginia. And he, according to prosecutors today, was the one who was organizing what they call the QRF, the Quick Reaction Force, the staging of guns in Ballston outside the city limits. Caldwell is the only one of these 5, by the way, who's on pretrial release, not in jail right now. He's home in Virginia. I mention him not just because he's local to the D.C. area, but they keep showing this image of him to the jury wearing a big Washington football team snow cap, which just to this jury may be memorable. It may just communicate to the Washington, D.C. jury that among those who are sitting in front of you are not just out-of-towners, but at least one folk from the area.
Right. If convicted, these Oath Keepers could face up to 20 years in prison each, Scott. How long do we know this trial is supposed to take, and kind of what's next after opening statements?
What's next is for me to get a very comfortable chair because it's going to go a very long time. The trial could last 6 to 7 weeks by orders of magnitude. That is just so much longer than the other January 6 trials, most of which have wrapped in 1 week or less. The stakes are higher. The charges are higher level. There are 5 co-defendants. We expect any number of witnesses for both sides, including other accused members of the conspiracy who've pleaded guilty and agreed to cooperate and turn over themselves as witnesses.
Oh, wow.
And we expect to hear from Stewart Rhodes in his own defense. That'll be something as he takes the stand, makes his own argument. That's
interesting because traditionally, most defense attorneys will tell their clients, do not take the stand in your own defense. So it's interesting maybe we'll learn why he wanted to.
And maybe there's an 11th hour change of heart there.
Yeah.
But Stewart Rhodes is a former attorney. He graduated law school. He probably has his own thoughts about what should be said on the stand. May want to do it himself. He may bring with this also this motivation to have his voice heard. He's got quite a platform here at this trial. His legal jeopardy is high, but he also has the world's attention.
Right.
He has a courtroom that is jammed, overflowing with media, and I think he realizes that.
As we wrap up here, did we learn anything more about, former President Trump's involvement in January 6th? I know many were looking towards this trial to see if there's any information on, further connections that, were investigated by the January 6th committee. Did we learn anything more here?
A few different threads. First of all, the defense attorney in his opening statement in the opening minutes made it known to the jury that Stewart Rhodes offered to testify live in prime time or on television in front of the January 6th committee and had his offer rebuffed. And the offer to testify live on TV was not one the committee was ever going to take seriously. So, but he did throw it out there and made it known to the jury. What else can come out of this hearing that has a January 6th nexus or has a Donald Trump nexus? We don't know, but with Stewart Rhodes indicating he'll testify, could be an awful lot that's said. The January 6th Select Committee, I expect them to come up and be referenced, but really they were a fixture of the pre-trial arguments where the defense lawyers were arguing all the attention the committee has stirred up, all the things the committee has said about the Oath Keepers, just make it impossible to have a fair trial here in Washington. And even if unspoken, I think the indication from the judge was that the January 6th committee was heard and seen everywhere in the country. No more so in D.C. necessarily than elsewhere. So it's not really good grounds to move your case.
Well, we'll see what happens over this trial, and we know you'll be covering it. Scott MacFarlane, CBS Congressional Correspondent, we thank you for your time.
Thank you both.
And after the break, do allergies have you down? That makes one of us.
Backed by the experience of its hardworking members, Steamfitters Local 602 is ready to take on your next commercial, heating, cooling, HVAC, or refrigeration project. Steamfitters Local 602 adds value to our community through its partnerships with local contractors and building owners, all while keeping the focus on improving the lives of its members and their families throughout the DMV. For work that's on time and on budget, go to steamfitters-602.org to schedule your next project. That's steamfitters-602.org. Steamfitters Local 602. Changing lives.
Thanks for listening to the DMV Download. If you like this show, give us 5 stars and leave us a review on Apple Podcast.
We love hearing from you guys, and your reviews really do help other listeners find this, our area's only in-depth daily local news podcast.
And thank you for making us a part of your day.
And before we go, you can hear in my voice, I'm a little under the weather.
It's still a good voice, a deep Megan voice.
It's deep and saucy. No, I have allergies, and it's funny because there's so many people who are feeling crappy. Let's just say that word.
Totally.
And it's because of allergies. So I looked it up. Apparently, ragweed is out of control.
Ragweed, what are you doing? Out of control.
It's ragweed, man. Because, so it's been rainy the last couple weeks, right? Grasses and weeds grow out of control, and then it usually peaks around mid-September, but because we've had such wet weather, and then really nice, good, warm weather after that, it's like prime time, baby.
Off the charts.
Yeah. And so apparently last week, ragweed was only at 25, like measuring it at 25, which, you guys can look this up yourselves. But on September 15th, it was at 148.
Sheesh.
So it's like, anyway. So I talked to a doctor and they were like, we are constantly hearing from people who think they have colds, but it's actually allergies. So here's how you know the difference. Colds, you get a fever and body aches, and it goes away within a few days. Allergies, no fever, no body aches, and it never goes away. It's like stuck with you forever.
But the stuffy nose and itchy throat.
Yeah, chenopods and sagebrush are really high right now. And hay fever, just fun fact, because we've always heard that, but what is that? It specifically affects the nose, apparently, neither triggered by hay nor causes a fever, but it generally happens in the fall, and it's in, reaction to allergies. So there you go.
Dang. Well, I'm sorry that the allergies are so rough. I feel bad over here, just, coasting through.
I know. As soon as we knew that Luke didn't get sick because I have been around him so much, we're like, oh, it has to be allergies.
Indeed. Well, we're happy you're back because you were out, Thursday, Friday. Thanks for being a trooper.
Dude, I'm here with you, and I know I'm not the only one suffering, so, buy all the things that'll clear your nasal passages so you can sleep, people.
Indeed.
And
that'll do it for us today on the DMV Download.
We're sponsored by Steamfitters Local 602. Our managing editor is Craig Schwab, and our music is by Real World.
Give us a review and rate our show if you get the chance. Tell your friends and family about the show as well. We love telling more stories to more people, and subscribe too.
And the DMV Download is a product of WTOP News. Listen on 103.5 FM in D.C., 107.7 FM in Virginia, 103.9 FM in Frederick, online at WTOP.com, and on the WTOP News app. Have a good Monday night.